Guys, I have seen two things this very week that should scare you or make you fearful about the bad uses of technology. For anybody that has seen this channel for any length of time, and if you've looked around at all, you will know that I'm not great friends with technology. Now, I'm not necessarily an enemy of technology, but I am an enemy of trusting fully technology as if it is good, as if it is God, as if it is mankind's savior in some sense. This stuff is going to let us down. It's going to let us down terribly so. And here's the two examples that I saw this week that, again, should make you terrified. So, number one, YouTube has flat out told and proclaimed openly that they let machine learning clean up the algorithm at certain points, or not clean up the algorithm, clean up the videos. So let's backtrack a second. Back during the pandemic, there was a lot of information that was out there. And as of today, it's okay to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. But at the beginning of this whole mess and ordeal, at the beginning of all this, it was like, oh, this is a conspiracy. This is all garbage. This is lies. But there were people that knew better, that were fervently trying to get the information out through social media channels. And then came the rise and the advent of the fact checker. And so, YouTube, especially, not YouTube, Facebook was eat up with fact checking, depending on what information you were getting. It's like everything was fact checked. You share something, you're fact checked. Somebody else shares something, they're fact checked. Videos were getting pulled down left and right, too many conspiracies flying around, etc. Well, from what I understand, those fact checkers were actually people, and they were kind of biased towards information in one direction or another. But YouTube has now released that they're just going to let machine learning do this. Now, machine learning is the other name for artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is just a program. It might be smart in a certain vein, and I say smart in a very relative sense. Let's just say it highly and efficiently does what you tell it to do. So you take some information. Let's say someone at YouTube gets some information about, let's say, possible terrorism. And so they're like, hey, we know that this isn't really terrorism, or, we think we know this isn't terrorism. So over the next 100 hours, let's scrub any video that talks about terrorism and event X. And so they can just turn that over to machine learning or to artificial intelligence. And if anybody even says a word like it, or obviously you can feed machine learning a thesaurus and it can know other words. And so that being the case, immediately all that information could just be scrubbed or flagged or sent for review immediately. It could just be stopped. You could actually control the flow of information. Now, do you think that a human being would ever want to control maybe the negative flow of information against them personally? Or what if they saw an event that they thought was very important, such as, let's say, a presidential election or whatnot? Do you think they might be tempted to control the flow of information? Well, what I'm sharing with you is not only is the temptation there, but the power to do so is there. It is there. It's not that YouTube has some humans sitting around that, like, after the 500th video they reviewed, they're like, maybe there's some truth to this. No, with artificial intelligence, it's just going to be false, 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 false. It cannot be convinced otherwise. It is just a program. And so it would delete all information forever in that vein, and it would be back on the people to try to do whatever they could to get out the information if they thought it was true. But you already knew this, but I want you to understand it has been validated that this power exists. Openly validated. Now, that should scare Christians in and of itself, because you have to understand that Christianity by nature is an exclusive religion. And even though the world teaches inclusiveness, because Christianity is exclusive, it makes those two thoughts incompatible. All the other religions of the world can get along because they're worshiping the same God, but all of those other religions can get along because there's no incompatibility there. They're all okay with getting along, but Christianity is always going to stand out as the preeminent oddball. And that being the case, somebody could come along and like, I'm just done with these Christian values. And let's just say they had a wrong perception of Christian values. Maybe they were just raised wrong in what somebody considered a Christian faith, but it really wasn't. And they misunderstand, but let's just say they hated Jesus, even though they hadn't been exposed to Jesus, and they just said, hey, delete. And all that information goes away, and goes away almost instantaneously. You got to understand along with that, let's just say, like for me, and I know since I'm promoting the truth, that eventually one of these videos is going to hit a nerve. And when it hits a nerve, the video isn't going to get deleted, but the entire channel will get deleted. It'll just disappear. You've got to know this power exists. And on top of that, in a day and age where we're just kind of looking here and looking there, how do I know if an entire channel just disappears? Like, unless I am daily watching it or heavily engaged in it, how would I ever know it disappears? And since everybody's not heavily engaged in a channel, there's all kind of information that could just disappear through rote censorship. So that just should scare you. On top of this, I just saw an article about virtual reality being able to produce the same results as medium intensity psychedelic drugs. You really should think about that. Virtual reality has the capacity to affect people in much the same way as magic mushrooms or LSD. You really need to think about this. So imagine someone putting on a headset and them enclosing their environment. They're shutting off sounds from the outside world and just taking visual stimulus. They are now understanding that images can be fed into a person's mind that can help them disassociate from and unplug from reality. So you already kind of experienced this with like reading a book. So you read a book, you can really get caught up in reading the book. Or some of us can get really immersed in watching a movie and forget for, a couple of seconds that we exist, at least until we knock our drink over and you're like, oh, I got to pick this drink up and clean up the floor and pause. But you've got to understand they're toying around with new things. And let me give an example. So they are having virtual reality meetings where they'll take 4 or 5 individuals and have them, separate across the room from each other. And as they are separate from each other, when they put on their virtual reality glasses, basically, and I'm just giving a broad overview of this, I don't have the exact particular details, but the person would then, anytime they viewed their body, you know how like you see your hands that are out in front of your face, or maybe see the tip of your nose, or if you look down, you can see your body and your feet. Well, your body is represented not by a static solid, but it's represented by smoke. And the part of your body that really matters, let's say your heart, and you stare down at your heart, it looks like a ball of light or some sort. And so all of a sudden into your mind is being planted the idea that you don't exist nearly as much as you think you do, or your body isn't as important as you might have once thought it was, or the boundaries of who you are and where you begin and end are not exactly what you think they are. Now that's a subtle thought, but it's being implanted visually. Now, as these 5 subjects around the room are beginning to converge, somebody will be over their headsets, like walking them through some kind of a social challenge. And basically the challenge is, hey, I want y'all to come together and kind of merge. And so as people are moving forward, I assume this part, I don't know this part, but like the virtual reality can offset their actual movement. So if I'm standing in a room full of people and all of us are 5 steps apart, when I take 5 steps in, I know I can't go any farther because my reality begins to clash with the reality of the other person. Basically, our bodies bump into each other and we can't be any closer. But when virtual reality, let's say you're in a room of 20 foot apart, every time you took 1 step, the virtual reality could like shrink the dynamics and the dimensions where you feel like you've just took 2 or 3 steps closer. And then as you were getting closer, like when you begin to, they're like, well, and I'm giving a for instance, like, well, reach out and take the person's hand beside you. But like, since your hand is smoke and their hand is smoke, your hands begin to merge and you start disassociating with your actual body and you begin to associate with the sensory perception that's being fed into your mind. And so they're actually having these people like walk into each other and through each other and have their essences merge together. And since one is delaying their own real sensory input and taking mental sensory input, they say these people are experiencing like moments of transcendence and beauty and unity and the, I suppose, like endorphins that are being pushed through their body and the experiences they're having is like a psychedelic effect. And they proclaim that they're able to cure certain things like, depression or PTSD or obsessive compulsive disorder and things like that. And so this is becoming a new prescribed treatment, a virtual reality prescribed treatment for some maladies. And so what if we put artificial intelligence into this game, and artificial intelligence begins to dictate what we see? And it's like, well, this person responds better to red than blue, so I'm going to put all the shades of red in here. Or we find out that people respond this way faster with green, so it begins to put green in there as it's, injects certain ideas. You could see that this could go a long way towards being impressionable to a person. Well, anyway, these people, they agree that in these experiments, they're like, man, I feel like I don't know where the end of my body is at, and I don't know where the beginning of your body is at. And now you think about the implications of some of this. Like, men are not supposed to touch women, such as in sexually. We shouldn't be engaged with women sexually other than our wife. Adults shouldn't touch children in certain ways. That should be a proper boundary. We also know, according to biblical standards, that, males shouldn't touch males in certain fashion and females shouldn't touch females in certain fashion. But all of that is getting blended. Like when you're in this virtual reality thing and you're looking around, it's like my body doesn't really exist. And they have actually stated it's like your body is not your body. It's part of the collective body. Wow. What happens when you begin to delve into this type of thinking or fully submerge yourself in this thinking? Like, I'm going to tell you, it's a terrible world out there. There's trash out there and paint is, falling off of buildings and cars are rusting and you get an accident and the door panel is dented and then somebody gets mutilated from being in a car wreck and you just go on and maybe somebody isn't interested in beauty across the street, so they build a terrible building. And like, it would just be so much more satisfying to be able to put on virtual reality glasses and just submerge myself into a different type of awareness of life. And so the people that are in this, they are beginning to, I don't know where my body ends and the other person's body begins. And if you have people virtually interacting in that fashion, and they're not really interacting in that fashion, it's only through the virtual reality that's in their mind. They're actually not even close to each other. They're across the room from each other. They're not really interacting. But in this new headspace, they are interacting. And can you imagine if someone engaged in that again and again, that when they come out of their virtual reality setting, like, number one, the world around them then is going to seem horrible. Like, oh, I need to go back into the mirage. I need to go back into where it's beautiful all the time. I need to go back where my needs are being met. But not only that, then let's say they're not that fully immersed and they still hang on to some grips of this reality. When they take off their virtual reality glasses, they might, now they begin to view the borderline between their bodies and other bodies as not really as existent as it should be. Now, you've got to understand this has been Satan's plan the whole time. Satan is trying to cut down the borders and the boundaries between our bodies. He wants us to commingle flagrantly and wastefully and sexually so as to promote disease and disharmony and frustration and every other side effect that sin brings into the world. But it's all under the guise of, hey, healing and newness. But you've got to understand that technology and breakthrough technology and new ideas does not necessarily mean they are good or will be used in good fashion. You see, the Bible already had solutions. The Bible already has solutions for the problems that I mentioned, like obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, PTSD. The Bible has those solutions. It already has a mental paradigm outlined for that. But if we are pursuing other measures, it's going to pull us away from the scriptures. So I share these things with you as don't hold up artificial intelligence as the savior of the world. You actually need to be fearful of these things and how they are going to be misused and how they're going to be presented as our saving grace and how they're going to, possibly unify mankind and get us all interconnected where we are, 100% in attunement until we're not and mass chaos breaks out. Just want to continue to share with you what's out there and how it could be misused in a moment's notice.